I walked into Granddad's hospital room and saw him hitting a rectangular device with smoke rising from his mouth. I ran over in horror and gasped because Granddad had a giant smile on his face. I ripped it from him. "How many did you take?" "Like 4. The nurse left it here and told me to have some." I gripped my head in horror because how could a nurse do that? Granddad's eyes were already red as he ran his hands over his hospital gown. "Wow, I can really feel everything. This medicine is amazing." I told him to calm down, but he was already licking his lips. "I'm really hungry, though." He gripped his railing and suddenly stood up for the first time in 6 months. My eyes widened as my horror turned to amazement. "You're standing, Granddad." But he wasn't even responding and just walked towards his hospital roommate who was eating his tray of food in his own bed. I realized what Granddad was doing and reached for him. "Granddad, no!" But he was already picking the mashed potatoes out of his roommate's tray with his hands. I've never tasted mashed potatoes so good. He smiled and picked more. His roommate was delirious and barely noticed him, and I dragged Granddad back to his bed and slammed the nurse button, having no idea what to even think. But when I turned around, Granddad was again hitting the pen. I took it from him and he dropped to the floor, his eyes deep red as he hysterically laughed at the ceiling. The nurse ran in and her mouth flung open immediately. I raised the Benjamin at her. "This is your fault. How could you give it to him and tell him to take some?" My voice shook, but the nurse frantically shook her head. "That's not mine. I told him to take his medicine." She pointed at the still full cup of pills Granddad had knocked over in his hysteria. My brain rattled as I stared at the Benjamin while Granddad's laughter filled the air. "Then where did this come from?" Me and the nurse looked at each other, and that's when Granddad's roommate slowly raised his head from his tray of mashed potatoes, his eyes glowing red with a goofy smile. I knew I'd left it somewhere. He started laughing just as hard as my Granddad.